Welcome to Feature Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram, Director of Product Marketing for our cloud providers in our Cloud Infrastructure Business Unit. And today I'm joined by Sejong and Matt again from the vRealize Network Insight team. So thanks guys for joining me for the second episode of vRealize Network Insight for Cloud and what that can do for our cloud providers. Sejong, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself again?
Sure, yeah. Hi Guy, thanks for having us on again. And I'm the product marketing manager for vRealize Network Insight.
Thanks, Sejong. And Matt?
Yeah, so Matt Just, I'm a staff technical marketing architect with the Modern Apps and Management Business Unit, and I focus on vRealize Network Insight and vRealize Network Insight Cloud.
Thank you very much. Now, last time we covered quite a significant chunk of vRealize Network Insight Cloud and the opportunity for cloud providers to use this and what it could show them in terms of discovery and how it can help them in migration. We uncovered the fact that there is a really nice application discovery capability in vRealize Network Insight. And we wanted, I said at the time that I thought this would be worth its own session to dive into more detail here. Cloud providers, when they're looking at migrating their customers to either their cloud or to one of perhaps VMware's hyperscale partner clouds, obviously understanding the customer estate is critically important to them. And typically they use a range of often free off-the-shelf tools to try and help them with this and a mixture of services to complement that. And what we have here is an opportunity for cloud providers to use vRealize Network Insight for cloud potentially to help them identify the application portfolio. So that's probably me doing a very bad job of introducing it. Sejong, do you want to go into some of the detail here around the discovery capability?
Oh yeah, sure. So last time we were on, we talked about the capability to do, network assurance and verification to troubleshoot the network. But another key aspect for vRealize Network Insight is to also do app discovery and help with migration. So as our cloud providers, take their virtual machines and then sort of understand what's happening there and then move them to another place, whether it's the cloud provider, hosted service or some other data center, for example, or cloud, they can do that and they can do that very accurately. So the way vRealize Network Insight works is we basically gather all the information that's out there, whether it's the VMware infrastructure or third-party infrastructure, all these things on the slide here, and we take all the data, and it's not just NetFlow, but we take other metrics, we scrape configs, we look at APIs, we have integrations with other companies, and just pull that into that one database of vRealize Network Insight, and then sort of map everything out. And we use a lot of machine learning for that as well. And then, of course, with the cloud migrations, we helped a lot of customers do this. And that, one example that is an external case study is IHS Markit, which is part of S&P Global, where we've helped them migrate a lot. And, just doing it accurately rather than their previous processes, we save time and we're, ensuring that we are doing this, accurately. I mean, basically, that's one thing customers say a lot, where basically they had other tools that did it, but it wasn't correct. So there was a lot of risk when they did the migration.
So Sejong, let's just drill into that for a second, because I've had multiple conversations with cloud providers and, understanding the way they do migrations. And that accuracy means a faster time to onboard the customer into their cloud or into the cloud the customer wants to move to. That also means more, the faster you onboard, the faster you can actually, start turning the dial for revenue, which is a faster time to revenue. It also means they can be much more accurate in their bids. And that's kind of really important because often a lot of time, providers will just add a layer of fat on top of the bid to account for any unforeseens. And really what we're saying here is this solution can allow them to limit the amount of unforeseens by being very accurate in discovery and the application cataloging to enable them to be far more accurate in their bid as well, because now there's less variables that they don't know about.
Yes, absolutely. So they don't have to worry about the rework, for example. And even our VMware professional services as an organization, they use vRealize Network Insight for their migrations as well. So internally, our groups and our IT groups use it as well as to do these migrations. So the other, so basically for IHS Markit, we do have, some case studies. I'll talk about those. But, basically in terms of how we fit in the migrations. So for app discovery, just understanding what VMs are part of that application boundary and what makes that application and analyzing that and taking all that information we showed earlier. This is what vRealize Network Insight does. And, we take that information and we can also integrate with VMware HCX, or you can use other tools and then, start to automate those migrations. And then, we can use other tools from there to secure them, create policies like VMware NSX. And then, what we showed in the last show was the troubleshooting aspect. So once everything is migrated to the new location, and then you can start to troubleshoot what's happening. And whether it's, the cloud provider service that we're migrating to another data center or cloud, we can help with that. And, the first step is that app discovery process. So we do have, the case study for IHS Markit on the web so that you can, later watch it on YouTube. And then we also have another customer, Employers, who also did a migration and they talked about using vRealize Network Insight as well. And that's also, we have that on YouTube as well. So we have lots of examples of customers using vRealize Network Insight. We also have this healthcare customer who used vRealize Network Insight, and they also moved to a VCF instance. So they had, one of the largest instances of VMware. So they had 70,000 VMs, 40 vCenters, thousands of physical devices. These are the routers, switches, load balancers, as well as lots of flows. So we took that information that was in one of their existing data centers and helped them migrate to VCF, and did that accurately and correctly so that they're able to run properly in their new location. And this, of course, people are moving because it's cheaper and more efficient. There's many reasons why people move to new locations, whether they're running out of space in their old one. So just being able to, do that for customers and doing it accurately is a key thing. And that's what we do at vRealize Network Insight. So, whether we're moving to the cloud provider VCF footprint or some other location, we can actually go ahead and sort of take that cacophony, basically, with all these different connections that customers have everywhere, the network becomes very challenging, and just understanding how things are connected. So as customers move to the cloud provider VCF, we can show how things are connected as they're troubleshooting things, and as they're migrating things, we make it a lot easier to do that. Another thing I should also talk about is how we have this rich data set of information in vRealize Network Insight. So, for the migration, they can use that information and map it out, but also they might want to send it to some other locations as well. So now we have this capability in our on-premises as well as our SaaS solution now, where you can actually send it to, things like Slack, ServiceNow, PagerDuty, multiple other locations, or, anything custom built that they want to take the information out. They create a HTTPS URL, and then you can send, all sorts of statistics out there. So that's another useful thing, especially as they're studying the infrastructure, for these migrations they can use. Okay, and then just really quick, just to reiterate, so there's multiple different groups that use vRealize Network Insight, whether it's the network admin or the cloud admin or the security admin. There's multiple different reasons why they're using it. And, the app discovery is an important aspect of vRealize Network Insight, but, this is something that's looked at by multiple people. So, understanding the apps is not just for the migration part, but, it's also for people who need to troubleshoot those apps. And also they might need to provision, infrastructure to make sure those apps are running properly. So there's multiple different groups and personas that could potentially use vRealize Network Insight. So, we can, I think that's enough for the slides. And, we can also, have Matt just show a demo of app discovery, and that would be very visual.
Brilliant. Thank you, Zhejiang. So Matt, last time we saw a rather impressive screen with lots of different networks being discovered and workloads and infrastructure within that environment. Is the discovery mechanism any different for application groups? How does that, how do you start that seeded up, that discovery process?
Yeah, so within Network Insight, we utilize multiple different methods. And I'm going to go and share my screen here. So we use multiple different methods around application discovery capabilities. So a couple of things that we do is, because we're tied into the infrastructure, obviously looking at things like vCenter, we're looking at, if NSX is in the environment, other cloud providers and so on. If we were looking at things like VMware Cloud or even public cloud capabilities, depending on, if we're just trying to do application discovery, understand what are the true dependencies and the application boundaries or what makes up an application. Also understanding as an application changes over time and having it adapt to the modeling within the actual application and being aware of those changes. Obviously, as application developers might make changes to applications over time and enhancements, or even convert, let's say, from a virtual machine to a Kubernetes service, as an example. So what we do within vRealize Network Insight is we utilize capabilities around, and this is our application dashboard. So these are applications that I'm focusing on right now that I'm actually monitoring within my infrastructure. And I'll dive into this just here a little bit more after we talk about the discovery aspect. So from a discovery perspective, we're looking at a couple different things. We utilize a combination of metadata or what we call flow-based application discovery. So from a metadata perspective, we're utilizing things like tags. So if the customer's infrastructure is laid out with tags, whether it's vCenter tags or NSX tags and so on, security groups, we can utilize tagging conventions to group and discover applications very quickly. We also have integration with CMDB. So if you're running something like ServiceNow, as an example, we can actually import those applications from ServiceNow and display those within vRealize Network Insight and all of their infrastructure and understand their dependencies. This also is used by customers who are looking to also true up their CMDB to say, they've got their applications defined within, example ServiceNow, but then they're utilizing Network Insight, and Network Insight starts discovering additional dependencies that they may not have been aware of. And they're able to take that and then go back up and update their CMDB within ServiceNow. From a naming convention standpoint, we can also use names. So you can group applications utilizing a naming convention. You can create templates and so on to help you quickly discover applications. But what we also have, which actually is pretty popular with customers, is the capability of using things like regular expression. So you can come in and you can use regular expression to do application grouping, group by tiers, group by application. And we also have a built-in pattern builder. So you can come in and you can choose, say, I want to take a look and use a sample virtual machine name as an example. So I have the positions and the groupings of the actual virtual machine here, where I can actually see, in this way, it's broken up, the name of the actual virtual machine, its function, the app, and then I can see this is VM01. So I can choose either different positions, and you're going to start to see the regular expression be built out and the application names found within that expression, or I can choose the entire group. And when I do that, it's going to allow me. So if I want to utilize regular expression, which is really, I guess, one of the key things that we're seeing is a lot of customers will use, especially they're providing services to tenants, as an example, they're utilizing very similar naming conventions, but maybe just slightly off, maybe, including, like, let's say, a customer ID number. And to simplify the discovery within those customers, they have that capability of using the power of regular expression to help them with that. The most important, what we're seeing most people adopting to and utilizing today, as we've added this feature within vRealize Network Insight, is flow-based application discovery. So this is where we're actually taking all of the flow communication, and we're not just sampling flows in Network Insight. We're ingesting all flows one-to-one, and we're doing machine learning analysis across the communications that are occurring within applications or between applications or between applications and infrastructure. And by running these algorithms and studying these communications, Network Insight is intelligent enough to actually start telling you what makes up an application, what are those tiers that make up the application, and auto group those virtual machines into those tiers for you. And then also, once we correlate the application, we can also see the things like shared services like DNS, Active Directory, correlations with other applications that are important to know, especially if you're going to do something from like a migration from an existing VMware infrastructure and you want to migrate to VCF or even to a cloud infrastructure. You need to understand, obviously, it's important to understand what dependencies those applications have and what their boundaries are before actually migrating them. And on top of that, even understanding performance metrics. How much throughput does it require? How much data are we talking? Does this need to be a hybrid application based on the amount of consumption? So as we go through and we start discovering the applications, we can come in and we can modify a scope. So if we want to just start off small, we could do that. We can utilize application and tier naming. We can choose applications and tiers. We also have the ability to go through on the scope here and choose by, like, let's say, entities. So I can start by doing a cluster, a data center, folder. As you can see here, I've got many different things that I can choose from, including public cloud if I'm migrating. Also by vCenter, layer 2 network. We even get into if NSXT is deployed and we want to look at it from a layer 2 network segment or a policy segment. And then once we do that, we can specify like the name of a cluster as an example and run that analysis and discover the application specifically within that cluster is just one example. Now, typically, you can also just say all flows and you can analyze the entire infrastructure and let the algorithms run across. And it's going to show you how many VM to VM flows we're seeing and how many virtual machines we're seeing in that infrastructure that it's going to run analysis across. So once the discovery process works, start working and it's running, it's going to start off and it's going to rate the applications from a low to a medium to a high confidence level. So this is basically stating, where Network Insight is at from an aspect of a discovery process and studying the communications and so on. So as it's doing analysis and the algorithms are running, it's going to progress from low to medium to high. And we're going to start to see that climb up the scale here. And we could sort those by confidence level if we wanted to. It's also going to then show us the application name. And what we're doing is to help customers better understand, what makes up an application, because everybody names applications differently within their infrastructure, is we're utilizing a combination of virtual machine names. So that way, which will appear here under the application name, which will help them better understand, what that actual application is. And then they can name it when they save it to whatever they want to call it, more user-friendly name, as an example. And then we're grouping them. You can see the tiers, the number of tiers that have been discovered or actually auto-populated, the number of virtual machines that have been populated into those tiers. So this is where the discovery process is running and discovering various applications within the infrastructure, as an example. And I can come in here and I can even, as an example, take a look at, let's just look at a bigger tiered app, just as an example here. So I can look at, let's see, we'll expand this one here. So here's an example where it's auto creating the tiers. So I can see the tiers that it's creating. Okay. I've got a web tier, a database tier, an application tier, And I've also got a NSX Advanced Load Balancer running in the infrastructure. So we're actually discovering the load balancing components, the controllers, and so on. And we're grouping those so that way we can view all the load balancing occurring within the application as we discover it and monitor it from a day two perspective. We can see over here the names of the virtual machines that are actually have been grouped into the tiers automatically, and the number of virtual machines that have been grouped into each one of the tiers. And then let's say I want to save this and I want to monitor this and focus on it from a day two and do migration planning as an example. I can click on save, and this is where I can come in and I can give this application I can name it whatever I want to call it. You know, if I want to call it MatSap, I could do that. I can come in and look at each one of the tiers that have been auto-populated by vRealize Network Insight. And I can see all of the virtual machines that have been automatically grouped within each one of those tiers. I can come in and I can rename these tiers if I wanted to. I don't have to use the tier names again, because we're using a combination of virtual machine names and then putting, the type of tier as an example. I can just come in and just call this DB for database if I wanted to. So you can fully customize how the application appears, and you can also edit it later to make modifications. You can
that's really
also,
good because you've got, sorry, just to interrupt. I mean, that's really cool because I'm just trying to think aloud here. So you've discovered like all the interconnectivity between the infrastructure, fundamentally at the infrastructure layer. But when you're looking at like the web apps here, for example, if you are unable to, what you're getting is from the infrastructure layer, you're not necessarily getting the actual web app that's running in that web server. But then you could quite easily come in here and identify it and save it save it. And then you've got all of the infrastructure associated with that actual application.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and we can even take it about, further up, beyond that. So because we're doing flow analysis, we're looking at things like what ports, protocols, and so on are being utilized to be able to, and utilizing those, we can intelligently determine, okay, is this a MySQL database and so on, and structure those out from a tier perspective. Now, we can touch on a little bit, the other thing to mention is that vRealize Network Insight has direct integration with vRealize operations. So if you wanted to get in and start looking at services running within the actual OS and so on, within that virtual machine, as an example, Network Insight has the capability of providing vRealize operations with the discovered applications and the topologies inside vRealize operations. So they import into VROps, and then within VROps, you can do more analysis. You're like, okay, let's look at the Apache service running within this VM and so on. So we're enhancing, even from a VI admin perspective or cloud admin, the view within vRealize operations, we're based off of the applications we're discovering here inside Network Insight, and providing that and feeding that to them with the direct integration. So that's also powerful. Yeah.
I mean, that's where you get a lot of the gotchas, right? You could see all the infrastructure and everything else, but actually understanding what is running on that particular OS, what the applications are supporting. I mean, they could all be using a common protocol and maybe high port numbers. Actually getting into the understanding of the application on the OS is that with this information, that's very unique.
Absolutely. It is, and it's powerful. It's a seamless integration, which makes it nice because most customers within their infrastructure are utilizing typically a virtual monitoring tool like vRealize operations within their data center, and then from a network and security perspective, things like vRealize Network Insight. So having that integration there is very powerful. And among that, we're also sending alerts from Network Insight from the network and security perspective into VROps, so a customer can actually get alerts and start looking at it and say, you know what, this is not something within the virtual infrastructure, the virtual or actual like within a virtual machine. I'm looking at this and I'm seeing statistics that look like I'm seeing packet drop, and I need to go into further to understand where that's occurring. They can click on that alert and launch directly into Network Insight, and it will take you to the context of the data that you're doing analysis on automatically, so you don't have to search for it within Network Insight, and you can quickly do more deeper dive analysis utilizing a network monitoring tool like vRealize Network Insight.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just to kind of continue on a little bit more about the application discovery process, you can absolutely come in and add additional tiers if you wanted to and customize applications. You can you can also come in and add tiers as an example. If I wanted to create a custom tier for whatever reason it may be, maybe I want to include a specific database that I know all of my applications use. We're going to see that, we're going to discover it, but maybe I want to put a tier and put that VM in it and have that tier across all my virtual machines. So they can actually come in and do that, and they can select a condition utilizing things like VMs, IP addresses, VMs with specific service ports, physical IPs, and then they can also do, VMs within another application. So you can get very creative and granular on, how you build out your applications. But the simplification and the understanding is that Network Insight is going to discover these applications for you, and the enhancement or the customization of those discovered applications is absolutely there within the product. Once you click enable, or once you've discovered the app and you're going to click submit, you can click on the enable threshold analytics. So actually it's checked by default. This is another powerful feature within Network Insight where we're baselining the performance of the application. We're looking at things like network throughput and so on within the discovered application, and we're creating a baseline of that behavior. And if we start to see deviations from that behavior, we'll automatically create dynamic alerting, letting you know that we're seeing, let's say, a highly increased spike of traffic between, let's say, a web tier and an app tier. That's abnormal for that application. We can have dynamic alerts that will automatically threshold trip and alert the end user so that they can actually look into that. Or they can say, you know what, I don't want to do that for this application, and later on set up their own dynamic thresholding and their own static thresholding to do analysis on that application, depending on what they're looking to cover. Sometimes you get real chatty apps that are all over the place, and you want to set specific thresholds. So you have that option to turn that on, turn that off.
Hey Matt, could you use that for detecting things like horizontal malware spreads, like over RDP ports and things like that?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Yep. So you can use it to discover, malware spreads. You can also look at, we have the capability of alerting upon new communication that might start occurring within the application. And what happens is because this discovery process and this machine learning algorithms are running in the background at all times, what happens is after you save your application and move over to your application dashboard for monitoring, anytime there's been a detected change within the application, a VM's been deleted, a VM's been added, services have changed, physical IP relationship has changed, stuff like that. We understand that, we see that because we're studying that application still, even after it's been saved, and a box will appear next to the application here that'll say update available. And you'll notice over here, it shows the last time the application was actually updated. So this will also alert the end users saying, hey, we've seen a change in the application. You can click on what the change is, and it will show you exactly what we detected. And if you determine, yes, I want to accept that change and update the application, I can hit save, and it's going to update that application automatically for you. The power of that is, let's say I'm converting an application from, let's say a VM-based to a container-based application. Because we're a time machine, you can absolutely use the slider and basically by going up and choosing the time frame, and you can look at the application, what it looked like before as a VM-based application to post, what does it look like as a Kubernetes-based application, and what are the performance differences? So it really helps you out to understand if for some reason the application starts to degrade and something wasn't done correctly when in the application conversion, then you're going to have that capability to do side-by-side analysis as an example and look for differences. Now, the application dashboard, we've got all our different applications here that I'm monitoring. You'll see each one of these hexagons represents an application, and as I move my mouse over, the shading on them kind of changes that lets you know which one I'm actually focusing on. We can show different interesting things from a high level perspective, of all the applications. I can come in and I can say, I want to look at all applications that have unprotected flows. So if I'm using the VCF stack and I'm using NSXT as an example within that stack, and I want to make sure that the applications are properly microsegmented, or also to ensure that we don't have flows that are not protected from a firewall rule perspective. Network Insight, because we're analyzing all those flows, are correlating every single flow to a firewall rule. And if we don't see a firewall rule provision in NSXT, let's say at the distributed firewall level, then we're going to alert and say that this application is unprotected. And that also comes true if you deploy NSX, and let's say you don't for the first time, and the default any allow rules left there, we're also detecting that, and we'll consider that an unprotected app because segmentation hasn't been applied. So we can show you which applications we are detecting unprotected flows in, and we can dive in and look at those flows and do security planning or microsegmentation planning and implementation within NSX. We can also look at applications that are talking to the internet, so we can get an understanding of which applications in our infrastructure have internet communication. We can look at applications that have shared services. So these ones that just lit up green are going to show what applications have things like DNS or Active Directory, NTP, various shared services within the actual infrastructure. And if we wanted to focus on any of those as an example to see what those are, I can click on just one of the applications on the checkbox here, and it's automatically going to show me. So this is the Hive training app that I just chose, which is over here. And it's showing me where it's got dependencies on other services. So these are other applications that I can see it has dependencies on, and they also have shared services between them. And if I wanted to look at those shared services, I can click on any of these flow lines to look at each flow and understand what are those services or communications that are occurring to make sure that I understand the true dependencies of the application, to make sure I don't migrate Hive training, let's say, to a VCF environment, and it breaks because it had a dependency on a database that's running in, as an example, the migration wave application. So you can easily see the dependencies there from a high level perspective, or you can click right into the application dashboard, and within the application dashboard, this is kind of we're going to get into more of analyzing the app, and then also utilizing this after post migration as an example to, like, let's say VCF or cloud. And we're going to have a clear understanding of how the application is performing. So we're seeing any type of alerts that are occurring in the application, how much traffic is within the application, and any changes within traffic distribution over the last 24 hours. So we're gauging that from an outgoing and incoming perspective. How many flows are occurring within the application. We're also showing you how many flows are unprotected. So again, unsegmented. These also could be flows that spin up that could be a malicious activity occurring within the application that we can alert upon. We'll also show you the denied flows. So if it's hitting firewall rules within, let's say, NSX, it's going to show you what flows are being denied or dropped within, and letting you know. And I can just simply click on the 58 here, and it's going to open up those and show me those unprotected and denied flows, source to destination, and so on. So I can actually go through and take a look at all of these and see what's going on. The other thing that we focus on is we do geo-IP lookup. So we also have a clear understanding of, what countries the application is interacting with or has interaction with. So I can see top down which countries that are interacting or are utilizing the application. We can also look at the flows. And as we look at each individual flow record, we're going to see things like the city and so on that the communication is coming from. And we can also utilize this if we want to block, specific countries of interest that we feel might be malicious activity. So we can come in and we can choose, a specific country and create an alert and say, if I see any communication coming from wherever, in the world, I want to be alerted.
This is super powerful for getting a kind of initial stance of the security posture of an application.
Exactly.
Customer tells you it's all secure, it's all good. You rock up on site, deploy this. How long does it take to kind of gain all this information and get a decent kind of view of the application estate? Is it pretty instant? I guess you've got to monitor it for a little while to understand the flows, the spikes, and things like that.
Yeah, so I mean, essentially what happens is we're always looking at every single virtual machine in the infrastructure, whether it's grouped into an application or not. And when I say grouped into an application, I'm talking an application defined within Network Insight. So we're always getting those metrics. And the nice thing is that when you're running the discovery process and it starts grouping those virtual machines, as an example, into tiers and creating applications for you, that data is moving and being included when you're actually discovering that application. So as soon as I click save after running the discovery process and I'm at a high level of confidence, this application dashboard will automatically have data like this because it's already got it from just monitoring the infrastructure before the application was saved. So, excuse me, it correlates all that, puts it all together for you. So you'll actually have a fully populated tier or a view of the application topology. You're going to see the data and so on. And then obviously the more and more it's running, the more data you're going to see. And obviously, if you're baselining or looking for security posture, or if you're looking for, for like, let's say, deploying microsegmentation or understanding performance of the application, you can take a look at, and let this, run for, let's say, 30 days. So you get a full view over the month of, what is the typical behavior of the application? What ports are utilized? What services are utilized? Do we have a script that runs one time a month at midnight that requires a specific port? So again, like, as we're implementing segmentation, we're not blocking that traffic. We got a full understanding of what the dependencies are from a security perspective when we're doing analysis on that traffic. We're also, giving it, the end users a topology so they can see, the various tiers. This is actually a 2-tier application. So the front end of the application is our video tier. It is actually sitting in our data center, running on, behind vCenter. We also can see our storage tier, which actually is a combination. It's got 2 different virtual machines running that are serving videos, and this is hybrid. So I can actually see this one is actually running in this case, VMC on AWS. And then also we have one that's running in native AWS within that tier. So I can group those 2 storage tiers within the same, or the 2 virtual machines in the same tier, but these are both deployed in 2 different cloud infrastructure. So from a hybrid perspective. So we definitely have that capability of hybrid capability view and understanding. We can come over and we can say, things like, show me all unprotected flows. And it's going to show you in red here where we're seeing unprotected flows, and I can click in and look at those unprotected flows. We can also say, show me all degraded flows. So from performance perspective, and it's important from like a day 2, is, we're looking at what is the TCP round trip time analysis of the flows occurring within the infrastructure. And if we detect that we're actually seeing performance degradation, so we baseline the TCP round trip time for every single flow. If we start to see it deviate from its baseline, then we're going to alert you and show you. So I can see the service endpoint, the port. I can click into the flow record. I can see what the average TCP round trip time deviation is and what is the percentage deviation. So this thing's deviated this flow 224.3% from its standard. So I can click in and go further and start doing troubleshooting and analysis, looking at things like how much throughput, when did latency increase, what was the standard latency, what is the current latency. So it's going to pull up and give me all of these data points and metrics that I can utilize between the source and the destination to start doing analysis and saying, what's going on, along with adding things like more filters around, like, let's say I want to add packet count, session count, and so on. As I'm doing analysis, you can quickly add new filters to the data so that you have the data that you need when you're doing analysis across, let's say, a degraded flow. Now, and then lastly, kind of getting into, let me just switch back to all flows here. You also get, an overview of what's what. You can see underlying network infrastructure that the applications or components within the applications have dependencies on. So like top of rack switches and so on. If you've added those as data sources within Network Insights, that can be very powerful. It correlates the network underlying infrastructure. You'll get an overview of all the alerts and so on that are going on within the infrastructure. So you see a lot of these analytic threshold alerts. We'll see things like vMotions, any configuration changes, whether it's in the underlay or the overlay. These Threshold alerts, as an example, are going to be baselined alerts. I have this application doing auto baselining, as I covered under the discovery process, where it's seeing inside my application for the high video server. We have an analytic threshold alert where it was baselining and said, typical traffic doesn't typically exceed 100 kilobits per second. And now I'm taking a look at it, and now I'm bursting way up into 40 megabits per second. So I've got some heavy communication going on that deviates from the past behavior that we've baselined. And that, I can start diving in and taking a look and see what's going on here by launching into the VM and start doing diagnostics and so on within Network Insight. Or I can use the guided network troubleshooting feature and launch the troubleshooting workbench here to actually start doing analysis.
Yeah, this is going to be great for taking a lot of the risk out of migration that really service providers have to involuntarily take on by default, because you're never going to get this level of information from any static network maps, or essentially this is giving you that information out the box that it's learned by itself over a duration. And it's definitely going to be able to allow them to de-risk their migrations by presenting the customer, you thought your application infrastructure was perfect. Well, it's definitely not. Here are the list of issues that we see, and they would need to be cleaned up before or after we migrate.
Yep, absolutely. And it centralizes everything and makes it easy to understand. And as far as the, even as an example, if you've got many tenants or many customers, you can take a look at this and you're looking at an application and you're like, okay, well, what VM or what vCenter is that VM being managed under, as an example. We correlate that all for you. So we take a look at all the members of the application, and we're automatically populating and saying, okay, we've got virtual machines being managed by our PKS vCenter running inside our on-premises data center. We've got also our vCenter running up in VMC, VMware Cloud. And we also have the AWS account, the EC2 account, that's basically has one of the virtual machines. So we can see which accounts or application member managers are, the corresponding components of the application are being managed by. So that helps group that automatically, so you're not searching around trying to figure that out. And we're trying to reduce, clicks within the actual interface. We're trying to simplify and bring all that data to a central place. So you don't have to go through and click and click and click and try to find that data. Just quickly, I'll touch on, we cover things like what's new. We'll show the incoming, outgoing, if there's been any dropped flows in the last 24 hours, analytic alerts, new members added to the application, or new unprotected members added to the application. We'll give an overview of like external services access, application ports used in the last 24 hours, and group those from a top-down approach, showing based off the total amount of traffic, and then showing you how many flows for each one of those ports within the application. And then also showing services access from the internet. So I can see, data that coming in or externals going out. We'll break out and show you the metrics. So anything, this app doesn't have any Kubernetes deployed in it, but this is all VM based. But I can see each one of the virtual machines in this, and I can see what the network traffic rate is to get an understanding of how each component of the application typically performs and how much traffic it's consuming, which comes important when you're planning migration to make sure that your infrastructure is built to suit that. So I can go through for each virtual machine and take a look at what's the typical performance. I can also, by default, we'll show 24 hours, but you can absolutely come in and say, I want to look at, let's say, a full month's worth. I can change this time range, and it's then going to show me from a full month's perspective, what is the typical performance. And as we can see, it changes within that 30-day period. So that also helps from a planning perspective. From a flow perspective, we're also grouping things and showing you, what are your top talkers? So I can see, what are the most chatty apps or components. I can see the virtual machines, the names, even physical IP addresses that might, physical workloads. I can see my, what are AC or AWS EC2, virtual machine based, how much traffic, how many flows, to get an idea who are my top talkers in my application. As NSX gets deployed within the infrastructure, if NSX is there, we'll correlate also within that application what firewall rules are actually getting hit by flows within that actual application. So we're centralizing to understand which firewall rules are being utilized and how many flows and how much data are hitting those. Now, this is a fresh install of NSX as an example. So I'm seeing my allow all and my default layer 3 rules. So that's why, I'm just seeing it hitting those allow all and default layer 3 on the tier 0 routers. So I'm not, I know this isn't segmented, but as I start adding rules, I'm going to start to see each rule get hit based off of the traffic. And then lastly, from a security perspective, right inside the application, the customer can come in and they can choose things like, how do they want to microsegment the actual application? They can, do it by tier, subnet, folder, cluster, many different ways that you can actually choose to do microsegmentation. Most customers like to do it by tier. So they can come over here and they can highlight over any tier of the application and see where we've got outgoing, incoming, and bidirectional traffic flows between tiers out to the internet, maybe physical resources and so on. And I can click on each one of these and I can segment based off of just between one tier to the other. Or if I want to, globally focus on that tier, I can just click on the tier itself, the video tier, and it's going to show me how many services are in the group. It's going to show me how many external services are accessed, how many flows are incoming and outgoing within that tier, whether it's inter data center, intra, we can define between inter subnet, intra subnet, looking at the internet communication. And then more importantly, because we're seeing all of this, I can see all the recommended firewall rules that if I was to take these firewall rules, which are for the video tier, source, destination, the services, the protocols, the number of related flows we're seeing correlated to these rule suggestions, the recommended action, and I can take these and I can export these to an XML and utilize this to import, let's say, an NSXT and apply at the distributed firewall level to simplify microsegmentation for that specific tier in that application, and then add my deny all rule after the list. And you can also expand these and see, do I have a corresponding rule already associated with the suggested rule? In this case, this is showing me the NSX manager, and this is the default allow all rule. So I know this isn't segmented. So I definitely would want to include this in my export and import and apply microsegmentation. If for some reason you didn't want to import one of these rules or allow this, let's say you looked and you said, what, I'm not comfortable with this specific port. I'm not going to allow that. For whatever reason, that kind of looks malicious. You can simply just uncheck that suggested rule that's going to have the allow action recommendation. And then when you export, it's not going to include that, and that flow will end up getting dropped once you put your deny all at the end there within NSX. So as you can see, very powerful features that you can utilize for planning migrations. We integrate with HCX as an example. Any application that's discovered within vRealize Network Insight can auto-populate mobility groups in HCX so that you can streamline your migrations if you're utilizing a tool like VMware HCX. We also monitor the performance of HCX. So we're looking at the layer 2 extensions, appliances, and so on, latency, to ensure that as you're migrating, whether it's from one data center to another or from a data center to public cloud or private cloud and so on, you can actually take a look and see, do I have enough throughput to support these migrations? How are the applications performing during the migrations? And so on. So you get all this data that you can utilize that is going to allow you to monitor from a network and security perspective the performance of the migration. And then lastly, once the application has been migrated, then you have all your day 2 ops and so on, like that I talked about and covered, where we're focusing on the performance of the application, alerting within the application, microsegmentation planning after it's been migrated, and so on, and then being able to refer to that. And again, because we're a time machine, I can take a look at the application. What did it look post-migration? What did it look like pre-migration? If I'm seeing any issues or performance issues, and I want to take a look at what's changed, what is different, what am I seeing here that's just not performing to expectations. Again, very powerful capabilities around application discovery, day 2 ops, and monitoring migrations as applications are migrating.
I would say this is extremely powerful, especially the microsegmentation recommendations that it had there. I mean, that's going to save a ton of time and just provide you with real kind of physical evidence of all of the flows and all the traffic data, and then be able to make those recommendations that you can directly load into your kind of NSXT environment at the target end. Yeah, it's a really interesting and highly capable solution, especially if you combine this with vRealize operations as well. I think there's a very compelling offering there. And Sejong, just to confirm, right? So this, if a service provider was looking at this and looking at it from wanting to run a trial, can they run the integrated trial with vRealize operations for cloud as well? Is that something that you do at the same time?
Oh, yes. So each trial you can request separately, and then the integration between vRealize Network Insight and vRealize Operations, that's by default now. Before they had to do some extra configuration, but now, all the information from vRealize Network Insight will feed into Operations. So that's there.
Brilliant, brilliant.
And then just like you were asking earlier, so basically, most people can find out what's going on with the application within a few hours and for sure within a day. And it's just like, as Matt was saying, it's just maybe once a month that there's that backup script that's doing a backup. We can look 30 days out to capture that as well. But a lot of times customers find out what they need, in a short time period. And then, of course, going forward, it's always good to monitor the app, not just for the migration, but just for day 2 troubleshooting as well.
Yeah, I can see this. Service providers starting to use this as a kind of trial to understand what's in the customer's environment and get a better picture of the status, the security posture, and stuff like that. But then the information that you've got in here is so valuable that I can see this being very easily sort of carried on for that day 2 that we went through last week, Matt. And there's so much additional value there that can be sold as a managed service potentially to the tenants after they've done the migration.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, well, listen, Matt, thank you very much again for walking us through that demo. Highly appreciate all of the effort there and preparing that and just talking us through all of the key areas of Network Insight Cloud. And Sejong, thank you very much again for your slides and talking to us at the beginning there about the positioning of this. And I'll make sure those YouTube video URLs are available as well in the YouTube description, so people can actually look at those and listen to the real customers saying what they think of the product.
Great, thanks, Guy, and thanks for having us on the show.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.